This morning, the biggest news this morning is that Sherrone Moore, Michigan head coach, has been suspended 2 games by Michigan amid the ongoing NCAA investigation into all the Connor Stalions stuff. But I'm seeing some confusion in the chat over the games that he's been suspended for. He's been suspended for 2 games. He's not suspended for the first 2 games. He is suspended for games 3 and games 4 because Michigan's going to make sure that Sherrone Moore can coach against his alma mater, Oklahoma. And that, of course, creates the funniest possible outcome. The first game he's suspended for is Central Michigan. That's right, Central Michigan, where Connor Stalions showed up in the hat and glasses.
I would suspend myself for the opener, come back for week 2, and then suspend myself for week 3, Andy. Like, I don't know. Like, if we're picking and choosing when we're suspended.
I don't think Sherrone got to pick and choose. I think Michigan picked and chose here. So, yeah, that probably would have been New Mexico, and then I'll come back for Oklahoma, and then Central Michigan.
Somebody said picking your own suspension is not a suspension, it's a vacation, and I thought that was hilarious. But, like, there's a lot to unpack here because we're, 2 years now removed from this, and I just still think that Michigan carries a lot of animosity from general fans about what happened a few years ago. And I think that if you don't read closely to why he's taking a suspension, you might take this as an admission of guilt that malfeasance happened a few years ago. And I'm not sure that's what that is, Andy. Why don't you take us through it?
Well, let's talk about what this is, exactly what this is. So what Michigan's doing here is self-imposing the suspension with the hope that the NCAA Committee on Infractions is like, okay, you've done enough here. I don't know that it will be enough for them. So you can negotiate a resolution. In fact, it's called a negotiated resolution. Some of the other coaches involved here have already done that. So Jesse Mentor, the former defensive coordinator who's with Jim Harbaugh on the Chargers now, he did that. His negotiated resolution was dropped a few weeks ago. And Steve Clinkscale did that as well, another assistant from that staff. This is not a negotiated resolution. This is not the end of this thing. Basically, it is Michigan self-imposing this. And right now, Sherrone Moore is still part of the case. He'd have to show up at the Committee on Infractions hearing, which would be in a month or so. And then the Committee on Infractions would decide, is this discipline enough? Do we impose additional discipline? And it's a little bit of a risk here by Michigan because they were still trying to negotiate something to get Sherrone Moore out of this. And maybe they still can. But I think the enforcement staff wanted a longer suspension than 2 games. So I don't know that they were going to accept it. And now that Michigan has self-imposed the suspension, I doubt they will. So now it's sort of probably in the committee's hands. But here's the other thing if you're Michigan. This process is so freaking long. So the ESPN story that reported on this with Dan Wetzel and Pete Thamel said this would get wrapped up before the football season. The hearing will probably happen before the football season. It won't get wrapped up, though. They probably wouldn't hand down the punishments till during the football season. Then Michigan would appeal. And so basically what this does is if there's any additional discipline for Sherrone Moore, it pushes it into 2026. And that's the risk they're taking there.
Yeah. And the thing that I think is interesting, and I don't know what your thought process is on this, Andy, but I feel like if you want to self-impose a ban or a suspension, ban's not the right word, suspension, in order to try to appease people who are going to be giving you a penalty, like, what do you think it looks like when you choose the games? Like, do you think that helps, or do you think that hurts, or do you think it's indifferent? Because, like, to me, it's like the thing that stands out the most about this is, and I know that he played at OU, and that's an important game for him. And they want him to, and it's an important game on Michigan's schedule. Let's be honest. Like, it's,
but Nebraska is arguably a more important game because it's a Big Ten game, and he's missing that one.
No, I know, but it just seems like I would, if I were a person that was punishing somebody, and that person's like, hey, look, I punished myself, and then like I saw how they punished themselves was like based on what works out best for them, that would annoy me.
Oh, it probably does annoy them. This is not the first time this has happened. You've seen selective suspensions before with NCAA stuff. Like you've seen players that did not get suspended when the season opener is a big game, and then they push it to a little game. That's what they're doing here. They're just trying to avoid that Oklahoma game. And yeah, it may piss them off, but I think if you're Michigan, you're like, well, it's 2 games. 2 games is 2 games. And if it pisses them off, then we'll deal with that on appeal, or we'll deal with that in 2026.
And this is important to note, too, that this is more severe than Jim Harbaugh's suspension. I think that the timing for Jim Harbaugh's was way worse, but Jim Harbaugh was also allowed to be a part of game planning and around the team during those games.
But that is because of an NCAA rule change that happened because of Jim Harbaugh. So, yes, I'm glad you pointed that out. This is different than when Jim Harbaugh was suspended for 6 separate games in the 2023 season. He was around the team at practice. When a coach is suspended now for a game, they're not allowed around the team the entire week. So this is a different kind of suspension. And Michigan probably would not have been, they didn't take the final 3 games of that one. That the first 3 were self-imposed, but the final 3 games in 2023 weren't. That was from the Big Ten. But it might have been a different scenario had Harbaugh not been allowed to actually coach the team at practice. So yeah, this is a very different situation. Now, this is over some text messages with Connor Stalions. I believe 52 text messages with Connor Stalions that Sherrone Moore deleted when all the stuff came out. And clearly a panic move. But here's the deal with those. From what I'm told, they're pretty boring. Because if they weren't boring, if they did sort of lay out what your average Ohio State fan thinks they lay out, Sherrone Moore never would have been hired as Michigan's head coach because it would have been too obvious and they would have had to fire him anyway. What he's suspended for in this case is deleting the text messages. Now, as soon as he was told, no, you're going to have to turn on your phone, he understood, I think, oh no, they're going to find these. Because I don't know about you, Ari. Have you deleted text messages from your phone?
Yeah, but for clutter. But I know that you can't.
They sit there for a while. They're not really gone.
Yeah, no, and I think that there's a record of your text messages too. I listen to enough murder podcasts to know that if you text something to somebody that
So in this case, they were actually still on his phone, and he knew they were still on his phone. So when he turned the phone into the NCAA, he knew the NCAA was going to get those text messages, and that's in the notice of allegations that he knew it when he turned it in that they were going to get the text messages. So I think, and I haven't seen all the text messages. I know what some of them say, but I think if they all came out, we'd be like, that's pretty dull. Because I think if there was something juicy in there, he would have been fired or never hired as Michigan's coach in the first place.
Too. Because people who have seen those messages, and there are a lot of people who have seen them, Andy, it would be very, very newsworthy to leak those. If there was something in there that was worth leaking. So that's the thing that's interesting too. It's just I don't know. I think I would be terrible in a panic situation. So I try to act like I think that deleting them looks worse than turning them in with nothing on them.
Way worse. And Zach in the chat says if he knew the archive was there, why even delete them? Because he panicked. Because that's as Ari said.
Yeah, I don't think that you think through things clearly. And again, I listen to enough murder podcasts to know that people do things that don't really. They think that they're helping themselves, but all they're doing is hurting themselves, and it's actually not a good move. And I think that's what happens when your brain's just in panic mode. And I think that he was probably afraid of just being associated with him. I don't even know that it was hiding what they were talking about. It was hiding.
I'm certain that's what it was.
So yeah, the thing that I think is going to be interesting about this, or we've talked about this so much, Andy, is that I don't think that the one thing that we have to and want to know about what Michigan did a few years ago, we'll never know, which is how much did what they do help them win football games. And I'm not necessarily sure there's a way to quantify that. Or
prove it, because apparently any communication involving that was verbal.
Right. So
there's no paper trail.
So we're at a position where if you hate Michigan, or you lost to Michigan, or you resent their success, they cheated. And if you love Michigan, it's no big deal. And we're just going to be in that limbo forever. There's no smoking gun that it's just if you were hoping that Sherrone Moore's text messages were just yeah, let's go cheat and win this way. That's not how it works. So I feel like we're just kind of in a position where we have to acknowledge that we're going to be left with this unknown, and how you want to remember the team and how you want to view it is up to you. There's no like, I think there's Ohio State fans out there that are waiting for the hammer to come down. I've got news for you guys. Even if he gets suspended more, or there's more penalty, there's no like definitive hammer coming.
Well, and we don't know what they're going to do in terms of vacating wins or that sort of thing. You know how I feel about that. I don't care. I don't think that does anything. The game's on YouTube, but the Michigan people probably care about that. So we'll see what they do, but it's going to be a while before we find out, because they'll have the hearing, and then the committee talks about it for several months before they reveal what their penalties will be. So I would say that probably pushes into the football season, and maybe deep into the football season.
I think that this will be impactful because whenever your head coach misses games, it's important. But at the same time, Andy, I found myself completely and utterly bored with what's going on with this, because the one thing that I crave is the thing that we'll never have, which is an answer to the question I just posed. I'm
Right.
thinking about this now, because it's just like, it's over. It happened. You think what you think, and there's no new information that's going to come to light. Like watching the
There's not going to be some 60 minutes thing. Yeah,
right.
There's going to be some 60 minutes thing where Connor Stalions starts crying and says, "Well, here's how it all worked."
Yeah, it's like watching.
It ain't happening.
I hate to keep doing the murder documentary comparisons, but it's like, you watch a murder mystery, and there's a 4-part series, and then at the end of it, they're like, "Well, we don't know what happened." It's such a dissatisfying feeling, but that's where we're going to be with this. And like, I don't know where I fall in the line of. I don't think that Michigan won the national title because of this. And I think that like there's probably enough proof to know that they didn't, since the hardest portion of their schedule came after this was already out. But at the same time, like how much Sherrone Moore and these guys were a part of it, like what do people expect? It's been 2.5 years, it's buried in the mystery, and that's where it's going to stay, I think.
All right, if you're watching on Twitter, it's time to switch to YouTube. The link you need is just below there. Come join the chat. Listen, if you're watching this and you're having the Michigan cheating debate, which, by the way, our chat sort of explodes into about twice a week anyway, since this all happened. Just come to YouTube and engage, because there's a lot of folks here who want to argue with you. It is amazing, because it does keep going, and I think you're right. I think it's going to forever. It's going to be cemented in everybody's mind of, this is how it happened. This is what I believe. I feel like Michigan did this. I feel like they didn't do this. Michigan fans are going to feel like nothing was wrong. Ohio State fans are always going to feel like they cheated. Like, that is never going to change, because we're never going to get the full story on this.
Yeah. And like also too, like comparison's sake, like how much they were clearly better at the advanced sign stealing stuff, but like how much better were they? Like, I don't think I've ever gotten actual context of like, here's what they were doing, here's what other people weren't doing, and here's how it actually impacted the game. Like, I don't know this. So it's just a frustrating thing, because I am a person who loves answers. I love a good mystery, and I love like the scandal. Now looking back at it, was like one of the funniest things that's ever happened. And there are certain things that I do want answers to that we don't have answers to, which is what the hell the vacuums were for.
Exactly. Daniel says, how many players were hurt in all this? That's what's important to me. Like, hurt by being embarrassed because they were beaten on a play. Like, I don't think anybody was physically injured because of this.
Yeah. I don't know if he means like hurt by the way that their championship is viewed. I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, I don't know if he's talking about Michigan players or Michigan's opponents, to be perfectly honest with you. So this is you're going to believe what you want to believe, but this is going to have a real effect on this season. Now, can we please once again appreciate how funny it is that Central Michigan is the game that he's suspended for first? Show that Connor Stalions picture again. Let's see Connor on the Central Michigan sideline. There he is. There he is at that Michigan State game. Man. Of all the teams they could have been playing, I knew this so we've been trying to figure out what was going to happen with this for several months. Peek behind the curtain. And I remember looking at Michigan's schedule like in January going, well, if they have to suspend him, they're not going to suspend him for the Oklahoma game. Oh my God, they play Central Michigan game 3.
You know what is interesting about that Central Michigan thing? And I was thinking about this, and I don't know if this is something that's been talked about a lot, but they were playing Michigan State in that game, right?
Yes.
Is it possible that he was just helping Central Michigan steal their signs?
Oh, that's the story that has been floated out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That he was helping a friend on the Central Michigan staff, that it wasn't necessarily. But look, like we've seen the documentary on Connor. Connor sat down with JD Piquel. Connor can do two things at once.
Yes. Well, he had the glasses with the record thing on them.
Allegedly.
The thing that I think is the most brazen about this was just the lengths of which he went. Like, I don't even know how much Michigan was helped on the field in their games, but like the fact that he was on another sideline as a staffer at a place wearing their stuff is just so obscene.
But not like, their shoes, and that's how they noticed it first. You gotta wear the right shoes. I think he was wearing Ons, and I think Central Michigan is an Adidas team.
Oh wow,
if I'm not mistaken.
You hate to see it, but anyway, I hope that we can just get a resolution to it, because I'm frankly just tired of talking about it. Like, unless we get more information, we just keep going around the same circle over and over again, which is...
I don't know how to break this to you, buddy.
Yeah.
There are going to be a lot more loops around that circle before, especially now, because I don't think there's going to be at this point, this feels like Michigan saying, we're going to take our chances with the hearing. We're not going to try to get Sherrone Moore out of this before the hearing. He's going to be what they call a contested party in the hearing. So it's going to keep happening, and it's going to go for a while. And I like, part of me is like, if you're Michigan, do you just attempt to run the clock out on the NCAA as an organization at this point?
Keep kicking it down the road by appealing and doing things that cause 6-month breaks in between. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to analyzing if he should be suspended any more games in 2029. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it's just going to keep getting stretched and stretched. But
yeah, especially if you're being I mean, I guess the Nebraska thing's interesting, but like the suspension against Central Michigan's like, oh, okay.
Well, the Nebraska thing's very interesting because it's the first Big Ten game. We think Nebraska's going to be pretty good this year. Like there's some intrigue there.
Yeah, I'm afraid to talk about Nebraska. They're mad at me, Andy.
They're mad at me too.
I don't know.
It's okay. If Dylan Raiola turns out great, then we're wrong and awesome. So
possibly turns out great.
I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be pretty good this year.
Yeah, they will.
I think it's going to be tough for Michigan to have to play them in their Big Ten opener when their head coach can't. Because again, and I'm glad you pointed this out earlier. This is not like when Jim Harbaugh was suspended a few years ago. That the rule has changed on this. Like Nebraska week starts, so Michigan returns from Norman after playing Oklahoma. Sherrone Moore is out. Like he's not practicing. He's not at practice. He's not in meetings. He's out for that entire week against Central Michigan and that entire week against Nebraska. So he doesn't come back until after the Nebraska game and they begin preparing for the Wisconsin game. So this is a little bit different situation, but they did pick and choose. And like you said, Ari, that might piss somebody off on the committee. I can see where that would
annoy me. It would annoy me.
We'll find out. Suspension games chosen, not dictated. But some more could be dictated. And I guess we'll find out what happens over the next few months. But that is the situation with Sherrone Moore and Michigan missing the Central Michigan game, missing the Nebraska game, plus some recruiting restrictions as well. Quite a Monday morning news dump. All right, Ari, let's
juice the show too. So thank you for doing it when you did.
I know. I was going to come on with sombrero, just do a whole Cinco de Mayo thing, like drink a margarita.
I was going to tell you about
recruiting stuff to talk about.
My wife and I went to a head spa yesterday, and it was pretty great. I don't know if you know do you know what that is?
I'm not sure I want to. That sounds highly illegal.
It was maybe the best hour of my life. It sounds terrible. Yeah, but it's actually for your physical head.
Oh, okay.
And it's just a scalp. They focus on your scalp and they just like do a bunch of things to your scalp. And like now she said I had the best scalp she's ever seen.
Well, look at the hair. Of course you do.
Yeah. But the reason
Rufus
why
in the
it's like
chat.
not done this morning is because I'm not supposed to shampoo it for 24 hours because of all the vitamins they put in there.
Oh, well, you can't wash out those vitamins. Rufus in the chat says, Ari, can we please get a gambling episode? Favorite win total over-unders, favorite conference championship odds, and national championship odds. I love it, Rufus. Hey, Ari, you want to do that this week?
Yeah. Let's see if we can call in a ringer, though, to help me.
Okay. I like it.
I think that I've got to. Can I bring on the dude I just
can you phone a friend?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes, I would love to do that, especially because I mean there are certain games like there have been certain lines like in the offseason where you and I latch onto that seem to hit most often. So like we could really take a look at like over under win totals and say, well, this team's probably gonna be better than that and go through the schedules. But I'm very fascinated too with like, what's good value mathematically. And there are people that work in the industry that are really, really good at that. We could try to have on, who's good at, Tyler Shoemaker's one that comes to mind. Colin from the Action Network is absolute sharp.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we can try to get one of these guys on and they can take us through their process. Cause like when I do it like a degenerate loser. When these guys do it, it's like high level math.
It's science.
So, yeah. And I want to give you guys the best action. Like, our prize picks last year, like, I guess we were just terrible at it. Like I don't want to be terrible at it. I want to be good at it.
Well, I think we can have some fun with that. We'll do that this week. Also, big recruiting day. Big day in the world of recruiting. So if you're not already subscribed to the On3 Recruits YouTube channel, get yourself subscribed. There is a big announcement coming today. Jared Curtis, the #1 quarterback in the class of 2026, at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, will be announcing his college choice. He's got it down to Oregon and Georgia. So he's from Nashville, 6'4", 225, the prototypical. I mean, they're talking about this guy like he favors Matthew Stafford as a recruit when Matthew Stafford was coming out of Dallas. So this will be a fun one to watch. Oregon, Georgia, you've got Kirby, you've got his former defensive coordinator, Dan Lanning. This is the old school, old line recruiting versus the new kid on the block. A lot going on here. Ari, we brought on the most knowledgeable person in the world to talk about this. Steve Wiltfong joins us now. We are honored to be joined by Mr. Vice President Steve Wiltfong, On3's Vice President of Recruiting and the Transfer Portal, fresh off a Colorado recruiting update and coaching 3 travel baseball games in the rain and the cold. But he's got to get to Nashville because there is a big doings happening in Nash Vegas tomorrow. Jared Curtis, the #1 quarterback in the class of 2026, is deciding on Cinco de Mayo between Georgia and Oregon. Steve, how you handicap this one?
Talking to sources on my way home from travel baseball tonight, I would still give the edge to Georgia going into this announcement, but we never sleep on the Oregon Ducks. His relationship with Will Stein, the offense that the Ducks have, how prolific the quarterback position has been, and how explosive the offense has been. And I think he feels really comfortable in Eugene and could see himself being uber successful at Oregon. But Georgia, the program looking to bring this recruitment back full circle. He was obviously committed to the Dogs, decommitted in the fall, and it's kind of been a back and forth with Oregon. But the intel has favored Georgia down the stretch. They just kind of need to hold off Oregon from what I understand here. So we'll see what it is tomorrow officially, but I would give Georgia the edge, I would deem Georgia the favorite, with Oregon still having pretty good odds going into the announcement. He made 2 videos. I talked to his agent on Friday, talked to his mom on Friday. He had an in-home visit with Coach Bobo, an in-home visit with Coach Stein. They were all supposed to come back tonight, but he canceled those trips to have a clear mind and be able to do what he's got to do. But 2 videos were filmed, so that's how close this recruitment is. That's how back and forth it's been. But my intel, and could change in 20 minutes. But right now, I would give Georgia I would make them the favorite.
Steve, when you say hold off in the last minute, we obviously know that late flips and late surprises happen in recruiting all the time. But like, what does that look like in the background? Like, what is Oregon doing in the next 12 hours that gets,
Right. So oftentimes people just go and assume that someone upped their offer and that moves the needle and that's what gets it done. And that does happen sometimes, but sometimes, man, it's just who gets to have the last conversation, when it's a recruitment that's that close at a place where you could really see yourself at both places. That last conversation, that last in-home, that last visit can sometimes be the difference. So it's not always like a financial offer that gets it done at the end. Sometimes it's just that last opportunity to speak to a prospect and remind them of all the reasons why they love that program. And it's the last thing on their mind before they go and make the announcement or sign the papers or whatever it may be. He talked to Dan Lanning today. So, but again, with all that being said, my intel makes Georgia the favorite going into it tomorrow, but we'll see what it is and how it comes out.
I was reading an interview with his agent, Peter Webb, and I thought it was interesting what he said, because he said basically he had told Jared to imagine that the financial offers are the same and then do your pros and cons list as if that's not a factor. And then also, it just that these two weren't the highest offers anyway in terms of biggest bag. So if it had been biggest bag, it would have been somebody other than these two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, and we talked about this the last time I was on your show. I mean, Georgia getting more competitive with some of their coveted targets of what it could look like financially has certainly helped them be in these at the end. Now we'll see if they get them over the top, right?
What's the timing of this, Steve? So, because we're in May now, but I would imagine that if you're the number one quarterback recruit, you're obviously the linchpin of a class. There are probably other players waiting for you to decide if they want to come play with you or not. Why this date, Cinco de Mayo, and not say, right before the season starts?
Well, obviously, when you're a player of the magnitude of Jared Curtis, you can help this class come together after you jump in the fold. So I think in a perfect world, whether you're the quarterback and the school, you want to get in the fold and help build your class and peer recruit and get guys around you. And I would imagine that whoever Jared lands with on Monday, he'll spearhead the recruiting efforts from a peer standpoint on the trail. And if you're Georgia, it's not hard to get to Athens for all the big recruiting weekends. And if it's Oregon, he's already been out there ample time. So I would imagine he would get back for some of their big recruiting weekends, whether it's Saturday Night Live or what have you, on their recruiting calendar coming up.
Steve, the thing that I think is really interesting is that Oregon has become a power, right, in the last few years in recruiting. And I'm wondering, with a national 5-star quarterback prospect the way it is, like, is Oregon already arrived as one of the big hitters in this sport in terms of like talent accumulation? Or do you think there's like symbolism or national recruits or things like this that could put them over the top? Like when you think about the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas, the legendary recruiting outfits that are finishing the top 3, 4, top 1 every year before NIL, like, is Oregon at that level in your mind now already?
Well, they had a top 5 class last year. They're a program that has certainly showed that they have the chops. They can go into Alabama and beat Auburn at the last minute, flipping one of the top corners in the country from Ohio State in the process, and Naeem Offord. They kill it in the transfer portal. They have a lot of infrastructure and support. Marshall Malchow, their general manager, is one of the most organized, experienced people in the game. I mean, before working with Dan Lanning, he was with Chris Peterson, he was with Nick Saban, and he was with Kirby Smart. So to work under those 3 head coaches and then work for Dan Lanning, I don't know if there's anyone that does what he does that can boast the type of head coaches that he has worked under outside of Mark Pantoni, who worked for Urban Meyer and Ryan Day. So he's got a lot of experience. They're a well-organized machine from a recruiting standpoint. And then Oregon's had a lot of success on the field. Now, certainly there's a few schools that have had more success, but we've seen Oregon play in the title game. We've seen them in college football playoffs and compete and win conference championships. And this is a program that's going to be on the short list of schools you point to and say they have a chance to win the national title this year. And had it not been a 12-team playoff, they certainly would have been in the Final Four. And even before that, they would have played in the national title game in the old BCS era with the season that they had. So they had a great year. They're trying to win that last game, which us three know as well as anybody, it's hard to win the last game. I mean, they're shooting 66 on the golf course and they're trying to figure out how to shoot 65. It's hard to shave those strokes. It's easy to go from 90 to 80, 80 to 70. They're trying to shave a stroke or two. And with that, you need to stay healthy. There's just, you need to have some luck go along with building a talented roster along the way. And they just, they got smashed in the Rose Bowl, obviously, and it ended a dream season. But they had one of the best seasons in college football last year, and that should mean something. And they're in there. They're in the right conversation, and they're trying to win the last game. So you mentioned that you get a quarterback like Jared Curtis in the fold, whether it's Georgia or Oregon, and he can peer recruit. It's not lost on me that the number one recruit in the class of 2026, Jackson Cantwell, the offensive lineman from Missouri, also has Georgia and Oregon in his final group here. I think about this, Steve. It's interesting to me because, for the 15 years or so before NIL started, those guys would get together, form a super team, and then they would all kind of coalesce. Is that happening as much in the NIL era, or is that does one of the guys taking one spot mean, oh, there's bigger budget to get this other guy? I think that sometimes we have seen, if you have some extra capital from a recruitment that you lost, it can be used elsewhere. So I don't know how that works with these particular recruitments, because I think with Jared Curtis and Jackson Cantwell, a lot of the heavy lifting has been done in those discussions of what off the field opportunities look like at your respective programs. He's just dotting I's and crossing T's with his family and representation. And Jackson Cantwell has one more visit to Georgia before he announces his college plans.
Steve, I noticed when you said this, and it just, for me, even it's weird because covering recruiting for so many years, you don't hear people say this, but I talked to his agent. Like, Andy, I don't know if that struck you as odd, but I talked to his agent. I'm getting used to it now. Yeah, no, I know, but usually in NIL, or transfer portal, not so much. I know that it's a thing and it's not weird, but for me, it still hits me weird. What's it been like in terms of you and your sources and covering recruiting and having intel and all this stuff? How much have you had to change the way you would go about things and getting into this agent world? And has it made your job more difficult?
Well, it's made my job more difficult in the sense of predicting where a young man's going to go, because sometimes things can pivot late based on those conversations. And sometimes the prospect's so important to a school, they just say, well, we're going to get this done, or we're going to do all we can. And if we come up short, we did all we could. So there's a little of that, but just from still covering prospect and their final decision and their journey through the process of learning who they are, why they're terrific, why they should be known nationally, to their early offers, to their visits, to leading up to their decision. Not much has changed other than the final hour. You're even more cautious than ever that a kid could change his mind. I love the two videos thing. It's like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. They film two endings, and they're not going to tell the actors even what the endings are, so it's still a surprise. But so it's still fun though, right? This feels a little old school, even though you're talking to his agent and all that. Recruiting's awesome. People are. It's supposed to be fun, and that's what, like, the predictions are supposed to be fun. I mean, people take them so serious and with such finality, and that's a good thing for how well we do a good job covering these kids. But following along with recruiting and the heckling from the fans and the rival fan bases telling you what a bad decision you made, and all of that is just part of what makes college football so great, the passion. And with recruiting, these prospects have become more mainstream nationally as our networks have grown in popularity, right? From scout.com to 24/7 to Rivals, and now On3, King of the Mountain, already had the market share from a viewer standpoint. Now the purchase of Rivals, we have the market share from a subscription standpoint now too. But our lane, our little niche lane, is becoming more mainstream by the day, and it's making these athletes more known, which is obviously helping their popularity on social media and things that then help drive revenue their way. And so along the way, you get talked about. So if you're a blue chip prospect, you're going to hear your name more on podcasts and written more in articles, because there's more consumers that are yearning for information on you. But on the flip side, you're also capitalizing like never before in popularity and a chance to make money. And these college athletes, these incoming players, are getting salaries without any return on investment yet. It's we think you're going to be really good, so here's what we're willing to pay you. I got something funny for you guys, as we got to go off the rails at least once. I was talking to a head coach that was like, dude, these kids, there's like we give them what we give them to come here. And then after their freshman year, their representation or whatever will ask for more. And we could barely run this dude out on special teams. We're not, there's no more. Like, we need an ROI here before there's more, right? But there's always someone that's representing the kid that's calling the other finalists and like, hey, what would you pay for Andy Staples if he went in the portal? And then that's kind of a speculative conversation that then the agent would take back to the current school and say, well, I have this offer, so I need a raise, or I'm going in the portal. Then you start playing with fire. Do you really go in the portal? Are you just trying to get a raise?
Sounds kind of familiar.
There is a lot of playing.
Yeah, we've heard this story, Steve, but it is very similar to something but it's interesting because when the Nico stuff happened, and we haven't got a chance to talk to you since all this happened, but when the Nico stuff happened, everybody's like, this is the first time a school stood up and said, we don't think you're worth what you're asking. No, it's not. It's just the first time you've heard about it.
Right. And it's the first time it was one of the highest paid people in the sport already.
Yeah.
And Tennessee, look, I don't know if there's more to the story or not, but just from my vantage point, Tennessee paid him $2 million to not play.
The freshman year. Yeah.
And I assume that I assume there was a bonus to just come. Right.
Right.
And then you have the $2 million a year or whatever it was. You didn't play, so there's no ROI. You're the backup. Then you did play, and you played fine. I mean, like, you were a good first-year starter. I salute it. But the strengths of that team was certainly on the defense, right? Tennessee was finally about to get to the point where they were maybe going to get an ROI. And the Heisman Trophy is really like, that would go in. That'd be $6 million over 3 years. I think the Heisman Trophy and making a deep run in the college football playoffs, I think that's fair compensation. But he wanted more, and that's fine too. It's America, baby. But Tennessee, I thought the wage was fair, and I thought I thought they still hadn't gotten the return yet fully on their investment. I mean, maybe they were about to as a second-year starter, and he was going to be on a good football team. Now he's a first-year starter in a new scheme with less talented players and a less talented team. Now they get a chance to go write their own story, so we'll see what happens with that. And
I think I'd get myself in trouble as a coach because when the agent came in to me for the guy who I could barely get out on special teams as a freshman and demanded the raise, I'd be like, get out of here. Just go. Like, I don't think I would negotiate with terrorists.
Well, I think like what I think happens is you got Ari Wasserman here, who just played his freshman year at Ohio State, and his agent has called his other finalists of Penn State and Notre Dame or whatever.
Yeah.
And has said, if you know what, and I'm just throwing out random schools, obviously, but It's like, what would it look like if he was in the portal? Could he make this much money? And they're going off of, because if they didn't play Ohio State, they're going off, oh, we loved Ari as a prospect. And it's an initial conversation they didn't even know was coming. And there's no promises made. But they could come back and say, well, this kid didn't really play. Are we sure that we think he's this good too? So it's – I don't think the players –
we've had jobs like we've all been in situations where we were negotiating with our employer. And like, if you tell your employer, and I realize they're not the employees yet, but they will be. If you tell your employer, hey, I got this other offer, you damn well be ready to take it. And it better be real, or you could be in deep, deep trouble.
Well, a lot of times, these kids are represented by a new wave of agents too. They're not like guys that have worked in the profession for a long time.
Well, like Peter Webb actually represents NFL players and like
exactly
he's very well established,
stuff like that.
Yeah,
exactly right. So Peter Webb's a legit agent. Jackson Cantwell is with Rosenhaus, obviously. Then there's people with guys like Steve, Andy, and Ari that have been agents for 18 months, but all of a sudden they're NIL experts because they said so, right?
You got to get the
schools
polo
are barely NIL experts. We're barely experts. Like, I feel like they're like, did you hear this rule? I'm like, no, I didn't hear that. Is that a real rule? And then you got to, so there's this talk.
Has it been taken to court yet? No, it's crazy. Like at the Senior Bowl, you see all, because you would always have the NFL agents. They'd have the agency polos. Now, Drew Rosenhaus never wears the Drew Rosenhaus polo, but you'd have that. Now it's everybody's got the agency polo because they're all NIL agents and they all marketing agents. So it's a dangerous world out there, and be careful if somebody who represents you tells your coach you got an offer when you don't really got an offer. That might not go well. So
I do think players like Jackson Cantwell and Jared Curtis need representation because of the opportunities that they have off the field. But I also think that a lot of these young men could probably do it themselves and just get an attorney to come in at the end and read the stuff.
Yeah. It's so funny how this just mimics real life, because I've actually done it both ways too. I've had an agent and I've just had the attorney read it, and it works both ways. It's just a matter of what you're comfortable with. So, Steve, I imagine 20 years ago, you never imagined we'd be having this kind of conversation on a recruiting segment.
I mean, 20 years ago, I remember it's been over 20 years ago, but I was at the South Bend Tribune working in a part-time role. And when I told them I was leaving for scout.com, people referred to it as a .com. Like, the internet was still new and people like questioned the maneuver. But anyone that caught the internet era in anything that they do is very happy that they rode those waves.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a former coworker named Ryan Hunt who we were at the college paper together. He gets a job out of college covering high schools for the St. Petersburg Times. This is a coveted job. If you're a recent graduate in Florida, coveted job. He leaves to go work at cnnsi.com. And I remember he came back to Gainesville to visit when I was still in school. And I said, what are you doing? You're going to go back to the newspaper at some point? Like, are you insane? This is going to go out of business. And when I got hired at Sports Illustrated, he was my boss's 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 boss. So if you caught it early enough, you're in good shape.
But you guys are doing good on your waves too, man. It's awesome to see all the success you're having here at On3. We obviously work for one of the best platforms in college sports already, and certainly just got a lot bigger in the past week.
That's right.
Sure did.
So Steve Wiltfong, On3 VP of Recruiting and Transfer Portal, that title likely to get some new words added to it as Rivals becomes our recruiting
I'll
brand.
You can add
again.
door opener to it. I'll do whatever we need to keep
As an
this thing humming.
scout.com, are you going to be okay working for Rival? That's like Coke and Pepsi right there.
The newspapers took a little too long to get on the web. They should have just jumped on the web right away. But we were all fortunate to work in those roles because they were great writers and grizzled veterans and guys that did the job the right way, just in an old school way. My first byline was high school volleyball, man, like a sectional championship. I was supposed to be out visiting friends somewhere, and I canceled that to get my first byline. Because before that, I just answered the phone for a few months.
Well, it looked like it worked out well for you, Steve.
That's right.
Everybody
He's
involved.
the vice president, Steve Wiltfong. He's also Coach Steve Wiltfong. He's warming up after coaching all those travel ball games. Steve, we will be watching with bated breath as Jared Curtis makes his decision on Cinco de Mayo. Thank you so much.
No, thanks, guys, for having me on. Always fun. You guys take care, and we'll be back soon.
All right. Thanks.
I love that he filmed 2 videos.
Yeah.
Like now I want to see whatever video we get, I want to see the other one too.
Andy, I don't know if when you were on Sports Illustrated, you had really, really tight deadlines, right?
Yes.
Or did you have time to
for
write?
the magazine? Yes.
Like when you were covering a game that was on deadline.
Monday. It was Monday because the magazine closed on Monday night. Yeah.
Well, when I was at Cleveland.com, my story was due when the clock hit 0. Like I had to have like a column ready because, as you know, in the internet, being first is really important.
Oh yeah.
So
you
there were
wrote 2.
times, and thankfully I covered Ohio State where 80% of their games were decided by 27 points or more. But like in the games where they were playing equal opponents, I would have 2 running files. I would be writing a story to the left on what it was like if it didn't happen, and to the right, I would be writing a win. And I think I have somewhere like on my external hard drive, like all the columns that I wrote of games that were in question that Ohio State ended up winning or losing. And it would be fun to like publish a book of like all those columns like later in life of like, here's what stories would have said had they lost these games.
So at SI, when you're writing the magazine story off the national championship game, the magazine closes Monday night. They would extend the deadline so that you could get that story in. But most of the story had to be locked down. Like they only gave you a little bit to play with. So basically the way it worked
Difficult as hell.
was, it's a 3,000 word story. You write 2 stories and it's basically the story of each team's season. And you get 800 words to play with. You can put 400 on the top, 400 on the bottom, however you want to play with, and you get to work with the top and the bottom. And however you want to play, you can go 600, 200, however you want to do it. And so that's how I would do it. And I actually did wind up repurposing a few of the losing stories. Like when Auburn lost to Florida State in after the 2013 season, I had enough good stuff to just kind of write the story of Auburn's season. I just recrafted it and ended up putting it out on the web. And then when Oregon lost to Ohio State in the first college football playoff national championship, I ended up reworking that Oregon story into an Oregon branding story that ran the following summer. Good. Because it was like the middle part of the story, the top and the bottom would have been about the game, but the middle part of the story was about how Oregon became a program that was kind of an afterthought and then became a national national team.
So anyway, maybe 10 years down the line, if he's an NFL Pro Bowler, I'd love to watch the video of the school.
Yeah, send out the video.
Yeah.
I actually published one when I was with the newspaper because when I wrote for a newspaper, you had to do that for every night game. And back when I covered Florida for the Tampa Tribune, I had a blog where you kind of put the leftover stuff. And so when Florida beat Georgetown in the Sweet 16 in 2006 in Minneapolis, it was a really great game, a tight game. Jeff Green was on that Georgetown team, and it was the Joe Kim Noah, Al Horford, that group for Florida. And Corey Brewer for Florida hits a baseline shot from his back essentially to win the game. And so obviously that story goes in the newspaper. And the next morning on the blog, I said, hey, you guys want to see what the story would have read if you'd missed the shot? Here it is. And so it's a nice little peek behind the curtain. But
yeah, basketball is really tricky because at least in football, there's like breaks in between plays and stuff for you to kind of prepare. Like
Oh,
basketball,
it sucked because you could whipsaw between two. Like in football, you can kind of fall asleep writing the two stories because one you can kind of just shove to the side if you think a game's going a certain way.
Right.
In basketball, if the game's within 10 points, you have to keep them both going.
Right. Because it can just happen really quickly. I don't like covering basketball, by the way. That was my low point in my career.
Yeah. WTF Craps, is there a live selection stream today for Jared Curtis? Yes. On 3 Recruits, the YouTube channel. Subscribe to that, and it'll push you a live message saying, hey, he's going live. 5:30 p.m. Eastern time is the time that he is making that announcement at his school in Nashville. But yeah, we'll have that on the On 3 Recruits channel, and obviously we'll have analysis of that from Josh Newberg and Steve Wiltfong and the crew. And if you're not subscribed to the On 3 Recruits channel, get yourself there because it is the best recruiting coverage in America, about to get even better as this Rivals deal closes and Rivals becomes the brand for recruiting. On 3 becomes the brand for the guys who are already in college, but you still get not only the great coverage you've come to expect, even more when they come. So yeah, Steve Wiltfong gonna be a Rivals guy now. Like that was funny. I had forgotten that Steve's first job in the recruiting world was at scout.com. And you want to talk about bitter rivalries. Like the rivals.com, scout.com rivalry back in the day was nasty.
Yeah. When you go to scout.com, I don't even know where it takes you anymore, but it is funny because that means that he's worked at all of them now, right?
Oh yeah,
he's completed the kit.
He has completed the set. Yes, he's worked at Rivals, he will have worked at Rivals when that starts, and then Scout 24/7 and On 3. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I'm excited about the Rivals thing. It's going to be the rebirth of a classic brand, and we still kind of look at Rivals as kind of like the OG of this. And I know how much it means to Shannon Terry, who helped found it and stuff. So what is
Zach
Scout?
In the chat? What is Scout? I feel so old now.
We're old. Scout was like one of the original On 3s, man. Like it was Rivals and Scout back in the day were the two big recruiting services.
Scout.com. It was, and they competed, and it was this was in the early 2000s is when Scout got bought by Fox. I believe CBS has bought Scout now, so 24/7 and
they have
24/7 just sort of consumed Scout.
But Scout.com doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, but it was fantastic. It was a hell of a rivalry. I mean, the rivalry still exists now with us and the other guys.
Scout. Oof.
I feel so. Oh, Zach's joking. Okay, you're killing me, us, Zach.
He was joking. Okay, well, I mean, like there are people in this that watch this that are 21 who would have.
Wouldn't know.
That wouldn't have known. So, but
it is amazing to me, Ari, that stuff is so old now because when I was in high school, there were no star rankings. Like there were you had Tom Lemming had a magazine, and then Super Prep had a magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Alan Wallace, and this part didn't exist. Like the first sites were just starting. And like at Florida, and
you would call, right? You'd call, like you pay 99
you
cents
call
and they would give you
1-900 number.
Yeah.
And then like at Florida, and this site still exists, it's called Gator Country. But Gator Country was the first one of those at Florida, and they had a message board called Swamp Gas. And and you get like
that's low-key
some guy who got into practice and watched practice would file a practice report and be like, oh wow, this is good information. So
I feel like
it was no matter dawn of all that.
If you call a 1-900 number, like the reaction on the other side of the phone is the same. It's like it's a swamp gas.
Well, and that's the 21-year-olds have no clue what a 1-900 number is anyway. Like, we should probably tell. Okay, so 1-900 numbers were a number you would call, and you get charged per minute for whoever you were talking to. There were 2 reasons to call a 1-900 number. One reason was to find out which recruits were going to your school. The other reason was phone sex.
Yeah, and both of them have a dopamine release that is killer. $1 a minute. But like that, it's crazy to think that like in 1975, if you were a huge Michigan fan, like you would just not know who was coming. Like
right, you'd read it in the paper on February 3rd.
Yeah, of like here are the 25 people we brought in with no context of like who they are. Like it's just like could the NFL exist if there was no draft coverage? Like, I just don't understand. And to Steve's point, it took newspapers a decade too long, even longer to get up to this. Like I still think there's a lot of newspapers who still don't cover it properly.
Yeah, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was really the first big newspaper that actually covered recruiting effectively. But I think part of it is companies like Rivals and Scout did it so well so early. The newspapers like, well, we can't compete with that.
You know why I'm sitting here with you, right? So my first job was at Rivals, BuckeyeGrove.com. And then I went from the Buckeye Grove site to a independent newspaper in Columbus that still exists called Buckeye Sports Bulletin, and they were affiliated with Scout. But as a result, because like I never was a recruiting person, like in college and high school, like I didn't know anything about it. And then my first internship, I was calling recruits and doing recruiting updates for them, kind of like as a journalist. I never was a recruiting person. But the first part of my career was an exposure to the recruiting services. Even though I was never a recruiting person, I worked at places that offered it. And it gave me a very important insight to how important and how obsessed people are with this. So when I got hired to leave the fan site circuit and go to Cleveland Plain Dealer as a newspaper reporter, like I brought the recruiting acumen that I learned that I wouldn't have, like if my first job was at,
it's something that people really wanted, like readers. And I guarantee you started writing those stories and
they were going crazy. And like the newspaper was like, oh my God, like people care about this. It's like, yeah, they care about it.
My first job at SI was covering recruiting. It was to cover football and basketball recruiting. So I was like going to the Peach Jam and stuff. But it was interesting because I had to do it differently because I was the only one doing it at SI. Because I remember one of my bosses coming to me and said, what would it take for you to do a top 100 recruits list? I'm like, a staff of 10.
Yeah, right.
He's like, never mind. So
I mean, we ran into that at the Athletic too. They're like, should we make our own rankings? I'm like, yeah, if you want to hire 25 people, sure, let's do it. Like, because I didn't like, if you half-ass it, it's very apparent.
Yes. But I loved the recruiting coverage when I was a beat writer, when I covered Tennessee, when I covered Florida, because I had been through it in the Stone Ages as a player. And so had some kind of, idea of how it worked a little bit. And remember learning, like not knowing how it worked when we went through it as a player. My mom had to read books that she got at the library on what to do. And so it always fascinated me. But yeah, that first year at SI, and then they kind of moved me to just covering college football after that, just because we realized it's too popular a sport to have only one person on the website covering it. And
but when I was a beat writer, Andy, I would cover recruiting just as much as the team stuff, because at Ohio State the access was difficult. They have great access. Jerry Emig, their SID is really good. They've got good access for a program, but there's not a lot of exclusive access, which is difficult when you work in a place like the Athletic.
You could get a ton of it with the recruiting stuff. What
do you do if you want exclusive, different stuff that people can't get anywhere else? You go to high schools, and that's how I spent my entire time as a beat writer at the Athletic. I skipped games at times. Like they played Rutgers, and it was a 48-point spread, and I flew to Tucson to do a high school recruiting profile on Bijan Robinson, and that stuff did better than any game story would have done. And that's kind of how I leaned into and was, promoted to national recruiting guy over at Athletic, because it was like the Athletic was discovering it in real time, the same way newspapers did 5 years earlier. And now it's an important piece of their coverage. So like, I think that being able to be in our position, like of all the mainstream media dudes who didn't grow up as recruiting dudes, like you and I are two of the national people that have kind of embraced and understood recruiting and its importance better than anybody else.
Bruce Feldman is the other one. He was the OG of that. Bruce Feldman at the Athletic, when he was at ESPN, he did tons of recruiting stuff, and he understood it better. And that he's one of those people that I kind of modeled my career after. And so when I got a job at SI and saw how he did it, I just tried to do it the way he did it. And it works. I'm telling you. So, but yeah, this feels old school. Like this Jared Curtis announcement feels like back in the day. Like I remember driving to Nice High School to cover Tim Tebow's announcement, and I knew he was going to pick Florida, but I was a Florida beat writer, so obviously we still had to do the story on him picking Florida. But I just remember like the buzz, like, oh, 10T, we're going to pick Alabama or
Andy,
Florida.
behind the scenes, like yesterday, you're like, we're having Steve on tonight. Reminder. I was like, yeah. Where's Curtis going? Just assuming that we knew. And like 8 times out of 10, just you guys know behind the scenes, like Andy and I know where the recruits are going before it hits the internet. And
we don't know.
We don't know. So it's going to be fun. Stay tuned. And just so you know, too, I'm sure you guys are able to pick up on this. We recorded the Steve Wiltfong interview on Sunday evening. So when he kept saying today and tonight, that was intel from last night. So we'll see if anything changes. And yeah, like it looks like Georgia's the leader, but we do not know. So stay tuned, and it's going to be an important announcement for either team.
5:30 p.m. Eastern time. Subscribe now to the On 3 Recruits channel so you'll get that push notification when it comes out. And you can watch Jared Curtis commit live to either Oregon or Georgia. Ari, we did not get a chance to have our debate about what the best college football job is now because we've stripped Kentucky of the title. So let's do that tomorrow, unless there's more crazy breaking news.
You know what's awesome about our show? It's every day, guys. So if we run out of time, if we run out of time, we'll catch you tomorrow.
All right. We'll talk to you tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, right here on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.